On both of those occasions that she was collected and added to the king's harem, to both of those king's harems, she was at least in her 70s. Can you imagine a woman being so physically stunning, so physically striking in her 70s that kings were still trying to add her to their harems? Hey everybody, it's Busy Mark and I am back with another video, but before we begin, I am pleased to announce that The Modest Fitting has officially launched, a women's clothing boutique offering skirts and dresses that embody modesty, femininity, and beauty. To learn more about dresses like this one and others available for purchase, head over to themodestfitting.com. But without further ado, let's begin. So I am back and I've actually completed reading an entire other book. It's called The Expectation Effect by David Robson. And essentially, so a little background about the book. He is a neuroscientist, and based on what I can gather from having read his book, he is not a believer. But I think he has inadvertently taken time to write a book that explains, and I would say confirms, that the Bible is speaking the truth when the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Essentially, that's a verse that says, like, whatever the thoughts in your mind are, those will eventually be the realities of who you are and the life that you live. And this whole book is written about how the thoughts we have and the things that we think and even the expectations we have in life actually become realities, because whether we mean to or not, we make them realities. And so I've said before that I always find it to be very intriguing to me, specifically when non-believers, without meaning to, just prove the veracity of the Bible and God's words, and how there are certain laws that God has put in place that govern our lives, that govern our relationships, that govern even the physical world. And I think it's funny when people who don't belong to Him tap into those laws and explain this new phenomenon that they've discovered, when in reality, God already told us about it in the Bible. And so I love reading books like that, which is why I read both Christian and non-Christian written works, because I find that if you've come across a book that actually is rooted in the truth, it's more often than not biblical, even if they're not trying to be. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about that was brought up in the book, and I wanted to just kind of share my personal thoughts, is the notion of growing older and the attitudes that we have about old age. In addition to discussing the book, you'll see that I'll be including some clips of some new recipe that I'm trying. I have committed to trying to eat more vegetables. I realize that I don't have as extensive of a command of the vegetable world as I desire, and so I can't really eat as many vegetables as I would like, because I just don't have a tremendous amount of prowess on how to prepare them. And so I went out and I bought this book called, I think it's called The Complete Salad Cookbook or something like that. I'll put the information in the description box below. But anyway, you'll see probably in this video and in the coming videos that I'll just be preparing some recipes that I found in that book that were particularly delicious, and I'll be sharing that with you as I'm going through the book. But anyway, so back to the topic, talking about growing older. I just want to read a small excerpt about what he said in here. He said, the most mind-blowing results concern the aging process. People with a more positive attitude to their later years are less likely to develop hearing loss, frailty, and illness, and even Alzheimer's disease, than people who associate aging with senility and disability. In a very real sense, we are as young as we feel on the inside. This is something that I feel like the Lord has been working with me on over the past couple of months, and I've just been feeling a really strong sense. And it's not, because there have been times where God has like spoken to me very clearly, and I can like tell you the words that he said. Like I could hear, not with my physical ears, but I could hear very specific words. And this wasn't that kind of situation. It was more just like I just had an understanding kind of being pressed into me that I just began to understand that I actually don't have to accept what I'm going to call the American narrative of growing older, and that if I desire, I can opt in for a different path. And I feel like God has been opening my eyes to be able to see what that different path into entering into old age could practically look like. And I feel like he's literally just been like opening my eyes, and I've decided to take him up on that. I just really don't believe that some of the things that we accept as fact as it relates to growing older, especially for us as women, this would apply to men and women, but I'm obviously tailoring this for us as women. I think there's a lot of things that we just internalize and nonchalantly accept as fact that have been kind of spoon fed to us from the culture of what just the realities of growing older are. And I've just come to understand that much of what we take as just truth is actually not true. It's not real. It's something that we can make to be true, but it is not just a given or just something that just happens because you are growing older. One of the first things that really started to stand out to me is I think about the passages in the Bible that talked about Sarah, Sarah being Abraham's wife. And for those of you who are familiar or even not familiar with this particular passage, but there was passages in the Bible that talked about how Sarah was a woman of such astounding beauty that when Abraham and Sarah would pass through foreign lands, Abraham became afraid that they would kill him in order to have Sarah. And on on 2 recorded occasions, when she entered the land, she was so beautiful that the men of the land went and reported back to the king that there is this new beautiful woman and you have to see her. And on both occasions, the king found her and added her to his harem. He never actually consummated a marriage with her. The Lord stopped that. But the point is I think that if you go back and do the math, and you will need to do the math to really come to the conclusion, but if I'm remembering correctly, on both of those occasions that she was collected and added to the king's harem, to both of those king's harems, she was at least in her 70s. Can you imagine a woman being so physically stunning, so physically striking in her 70s that kings were still trying to add her to their harems? And I just think that it's funny because I think it's when you juxtapose that biblical account with how we think about old age, especially here in the United States, the two don't go together. They don't seem to align and to match. But as always, whenever, at least for me, whenever there's a discrepancy between what the Bible depicts and what the culture depicts, I always believe the Bible. Another situation that I came across while reading the Bible is the account of Moses. And again, I'm going to have to double check because I'm working off the top of my head here. But if I remember correctly, Moses was 120 years old when he died. And the Bible records that when he died, his eyes were undimmed and the vigor of his body was unabated. So that goes to show you that what we believe about growing old and getting old, for at least these two people in the Bible, we don't see that this just the inevitable aging process affected them, both a man and a woman, in the way that we just assume. It says that Moses, his vigor was unabated. He died with the full strength in his body. He still had strength and vigor, the strength and vigor of a young man in his body. And he died in that condition. And so what it got me understanding is that, well, if the Lord would preserve Sarah in that way, and the Lord preserved Moses in that way, And I am also one of his daughters, and I have access to him because of my King Jesus, and he loves me as much as he loves them. Is this why couldn't this be something that I asked for? Why couldn't I ask the Lord to preserve me as he preserved Sarah, or to preserve me as he preserved Moses? And I realized the more I thought about it, there was no reason that I couldn't ask my Father to preserve me in those ways. And what I think happened because I actually started praying to that effect. I prayed, well, God, if growing, I'm seeing in your word that growing old doesn't have to be what they keep telling me growing old means. Well, if in your word I see something different, then I'm going to start praying to that effect. And I think what he did is the way that he answered my prayer is that he started to change my mind, or in New Testament language, he started to renew my mind about how I understand growing old and what it means and what it has to mean. And this entire book, this Expectation Effect, spends extensive amounts of time discussing how what we believe specifically as it relates to old age will actually determine and dictate what the realities of old age will be for us. The author went on to elaborate in a later portion of the book. He said the people who felt that they had more control over their fate were not adversely affected by the fears of aging. If anything, they tended to do better on the test after being primed with all those thoughts of frailty and decline than people who had not been exposed to negative stereotypes. They seemed to have been energized by the opportunity to prove themselves as exceptions to the pessimistic predictions of aging. Now, what he's alluding to is a study that was done about how if you can influence the thoughts of people's mind, even people who are already well into older age, if you can influence their thoughts about how they think about older age, they started to see measurable improvements even in physical feats that these older people could do just simply by influencing their thoughts, and specifically influencing their thoughts for the positive. But my point in mentioning these more scientific studies is that it's just going to prove that, like, as a man thinketh, so is he. And so I think that we have to be really careful to just, we need to be very selective and careful about the messaging that we allow to enter into our ears and then sink into our hearts. Because if you let someone tell you, as they tried to in the last book that I read, that growing old means growing overweight, or growing old means growing unattractive, or growing old means dressing in a kind of shabby way. If you let that stuff get in your ears and sink into your heart and let it become a permanent fixation in your thoughts, you will, as you think it, you will make it so. Like, you will make it a reality. And I feel like I said before, I just feel like God was he let me know, like, you can choose that, but you can also choose something else. And I feel like I'm very fortunate because I live in an area where, and I thank my husband, and ultimately I thank the Lord for this, but we live in an area where there's ample opportunity to be physically active. I have the privilege of being able to go out there and get a morning walk in, but something that I've noticed, it's very peculiar, is as I'm doing my walk, I started to notice that I was getting lapped by these older ladies. They were older women, head full of beautiful long gray and silver hair, pulled back in a ponytail, and they were jogging, and I could just see their ponytails swinging in the wind, and they were jogging and running. And these are women in an age bracket that the culture would say, as you get older, you just can't do that kind of stuff. Both of them, they were running, they were active, they were lapping me, a woman probably 30 years their junior. And they were in beautiful condition, beautiful shape. And I feel like sometimes what the Lord does is, like, just to kind of boost your faith, he'll let you see something. He'll let you see an example. He'll just give you a little glimmer so that it'll bolster your faith, and you'll believe it more, that yeah, this really is a possibility for me. And so I'm always encouraged, if they would let me film them, or if they would let me talk to them, I would love to get them on camera, just so that you guys could see what I'm seeing when I'm talking about these are women in their 50s, 60s. There's a lady out there who, she looks no younger than 80, and she's out there running every morning. She runs the whole trail. It's over 3 miles long, and she runs the whole trail without stopping. This past summer we went to the pool, and I was there with my husband and our children, and this lady walked in. She was an older lady. She probably was in her late 80s, and she just came in, and she just had on a cute pink swimsuit, and I just was struck with the fact that she was clearly an older woman. But it was also very clear that she had taken the responsibility to steward her body appropriately and responsibly, very seriously. Because even as a woman in her 80s, she had an hourglass figure that was still intact, and she was healthy, and she was spry, and she was vibrant. And then I presume her son came in, and he looked like he was about 40 years old. He also was in excellent condition and great shape. And I just thought, wow, what a legacy to be able to see in the generations, that age is not something that necessarily guarantees that you're going to get bent out of shape and out of breath and tired and distorted. And they were standing upright, very healthy, very fit, in great condition. It was clear they ate properly and exercised. And I thought, wow, what a privilege this is for me as a younger woman, to be able to look at women who are ahead of me on the path and see, I actually don't have to just choose or accept what the American culture tells me is just my inevitable doom about growing older. I actually can choose something different. And not only can I choose something different, I have the privilege of seeing people who have already chosen to do the something different, and they're experiencing the fruits of the decisions that they're making, and they're experiencing those fruits in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s. And it was just such a really profoundly impactful for me, and I wanted to share it with you all, because I know that sometimes for many people, because of the assumptions, because of the beliefs that they have, because of the expectations, as this book calls it, that they have about growing older is something that they look at with apprehension. But I would challenge you to question, what things have you believed about growing older that may not actually be true? How does what you believe about growing older align with some of the examples that we see in the Bible? What kinds of stereotypes has the culture kind of non-verbally or verbally communicated to you about what getting older or getting old means? And why does it make you afraid? I would challenge you to question those things. And if you can, root up and dig out any falsehood that might be setting you up to create a negative self-fulfilling prophecy that may not even align with what God has intended for you, or what God has planned for you, or even what God is able to do through your body despite age. So that's kind of why I want to share it, because I just, when you just like know something, when you know that you know that you know, I know that I know that I know. I just have solid conviction that I actually look forward to getting older, because I don't see getting older as something grim and dreary and being in pain and being tired. I fully intend to enter into older age full of vitality, full of vigor, full of strength, even full of beauty and shapeliness. Because I believe that it is a possibility. I don't think that those are things that have to go by the wayside simply because we are getting older. I just know in my heart of hearts that that's not a guarantee. You don't have to just accept that. And now that I know that I don't have to accept it, I'm actively making the decisions. I'm sowing seeds now for the kind of fruit that I want to eat when I'm 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 or 100, should the Lord let me see that age. I'm sowing those seeds now. A lot of people know about kind of my routine for activity, about how I'm generally mindful about what I eat. I'm pretty consistent with going for my walks and my runs and lifting weights, and they think that I'm doing it for now. I'm not working out today for today. I'm working out today for old age, because I have a vision in my mind about what growing older is going to look like for me. And so because I know where I'm headed, I'm sowing the seeds now. But I don't want to say that to make you feel like, oh, that your boat has sailed. It is never too late to start putting healthy seeds into the ground. It's never too late to start sowing good seed and allowing the Lord to allow you to harvest good crops. It's never too late to do that. And I just wanted to share that because I feel so convicted about it. I want to bring as many people with me as I can. That old age is not something that we have to look at and feel afraid of, and that's when it goes downhill. No, I intend for the Lord to take me with guns blazing. I do not expect to decline when the Lord calls me home. I expect to be on an incline all the way until he says, all right, that's the allotted time I had for you. I'm calling you to myself now. I wanted to close with this. I remember not too long ago, I'm going to see if I can find the clip because I want to share it with you. I'm always interested in researching Black history, not just in the United States, but across the world. Obviously, as a Black woman, I even understanding the Black people groups throughout the Bible is something that I have studied because it's fascinating to me. But one of these times I was looking at Black people in Mexico, and I came across this guy. He's not even a professional documentary person. He just, took his camera with him on vacation, and he came across this. He was in Mexico, and he came across this older man who was out in his land, tilling his land. And he had no shirt on, and he was out there working really hard. He had strength in his body, still very healthy. And I think he asked him how old he was, and he was an older man. And it was beside the point, because the guy who was interviewing him was just trying to get some other information from him. But it struck me to be able to see wow, that's a man who's older, but even in his old age, not only has his vigor has remained unabated, as the Bible described to Moses, but not only does he have strength, he has strength to the effect that he's able to get outside and still till the soil of his own land and prepare it for seed. And I thought about that. I said, wow, a man his age who was American would probably be in very different condition. But these people in other countries, they age in very different ways from us. My point is I was this man's physical labor preserved him to such an extent that even in old age, he still had strength in his body. He still had vigor and vitality, walking around like he's a young 30 or 40-year-old man. It was astounding to me to see. And so I just want to sometimes I think we just need to have our ideas challenged, because there are some things that we just accept as truth, and sometimes they're not true. But us believing something that is not true can in the long run be very costly to us. If you believe that I'll say it like this. I've come to understand that growing old is a gift from God, but growing old and decrepit is a choice. And I now know that. In my heart of hearts, I know it. I do not see growing old and decrepit, as they call it, an inevitability of age. It is not. But if you believe that it is, you will and can make it so. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.